This year I want to share two stories with you about survival from October 7th. They have buoyed my spirits, and on the same time, they have created tremendous uncertainty for our path to the future. I first met Baruch Cohen at the Lowenstein Rehabilitation Hospital in Israel in December. Baruch was a steely man who I imagine if he stood up was about 6'3", maybe 270 pounds, my kind of yid. He was calm, he was focused, he was clear. And the entire time he spoke to us, I don't think his heart rate went over 70 beats a minute. He was the kind of guy that when he spoke, you just paid attention. He had this deep baritone voice, and as he started to tell his story in a very methodical way, what became clear is that he had told this story at least dozens of times because it was quite organized. Baruch lives on Kibbutz Magain. He's 73 years old. Kibbutz Magain is maybe a kilometer away from the Gaza border. And all of these communities on the Gaza border have a Kitat Konanut, which you and I would call a community patrol. They're a group of concerned citizens that give patrol over the area, and before October 7th, they really had a very quiet existence. But Baruch appointed himself the leader of the community patrol. You see, even though he's in his 70s now, he was clearly a force to be reckoned with. And Baruch, at his size, was clearly a warrior in earlier days. He was a paratrooper in the Yom Kippur 1973 war. And while he took this role very seriously, everyone he recruited to be in this Kitat Konanut, this community patrol, they weren't too fond of Baruch. And they weren't because he always pushed them to the max. He insisted on their days off, that they should all go for sharpshooting training. Not encouraging, insisting. When most groups met once every 2 months, he met every 2 weeks. And he insisted that people be prepared for the worst. So on October 7th, when the sirens went off at Kibbutz Magain and everyone went to their bomb shelter, Baruch did what no person should do. He went to the watchtower up high at Kibbutz Magain. That's about the least safe place to be when rockets are flying in. But it gives you a bird's eye view of the kibbutz, and you can see directly into Gaza. And it was at that very moment that Baruch's worst fears were confirmed. You see, Baruch saw dozens of Toyota pickup trucks filled with Hamas terrorists, armed to the teeth, breaking through the barrier wall and coming over to Israel. He immediately called for backup on his walkie-talkie. Everyone was armed and ready. They took their stations. I almost said man, but I didn't, because in the border patrol of Kibbutz Magain, there are men and women who ensure the safety of the kibbutz. And when the terrorists arrived at Kibbutz Magain a few minutes later, they were fought off by Baruch and others, and not one terrorist was able to infiltrate. And then 3 or 4 convoys who had their own walkie-talkies passed by Kibbutz Magain and went down the road. And Baruch said, oh no, they're going to go to another kibbutz. They're going to go to the Nova Festival, which is only about a mile away. So Baruch jumps in his Toyota, goes through the gate of the kibbutz and chases them down on the highway and shoots them all in the back. Kills every single one of them. Turns his car around and comes back to the kibbutz and fights off different salvos of terrorists who had tried to infiltrate Kibbutz Magain for 6.5 hours. Then a group of terrorists came with an RPG, which is a shoulder-launched missile. And as others, including Baruch, were fighting them off behind the protection of their Toyota car, the terrorists shot the RPG at the car. It blew up. And Baruch went flying into the ground. He knew he was seriously injured. He looked down at his leg. It was bleeding profusely. And the terrorists didn't know if they killed him, so they shot him 3 more times. Baruch reached into his pocket and grabbed his knife. He said, if the terrorists try and come up to me to see if I'm dead, I'll stab them as my last act. He held that knife and played dead. The terrorists did not come up to him. He took his belt and tied a tourniquet to his leg. He closed his eyes and said, this will be my final resting place. And he thought how sad it was and how poetic it was that he would die fighting for the home that he had lived in all of his life. He closed his eyes and he next opened them and saw that he was surrounded by soldiers, and then opened them again next to see himself in a hospital room with tubes and monitors around. Not one member of Kibbutz Magain was killed on October 7th. Not one. And most attribute that miracle to the preparedness of Baruch Cohen. He was injured so badly and sure that he died, and so were his family, that his kid went to the morgue and looked at different faces for days trying to identify his father. They thought there was no way he could have survived. And those communities are so tight-knit and small, everyone knew each other. So the father is expected to be dead. The son goes in and says, no, that's not my dad, but I know that person. No, that's not my dad, but that's an uncle. That's a person I work with. And he kept identifying people, but he couldn't find his father. And someone said to him, there's an unidentified man in the critical care ICU. Come up. And he walks in, and it was his dad. The dead had come back to life. It was indeed an incredible miracle. Every single person at Kibbutz Magain attributes the miracle of their survival to Baruch. Like most heroes in the world, Baruch ran towards danger, not away from it. Like most heroes in the world, Baruch was selfless. And like most heroes in the world, Baruch has no idea of the impact he has made in people's lives. When Baruch spoke to us in December, he had everyone in the group hanging on every word of his broken English. He was steely. He felt like a superhero. He made me tremble in awe. And in his voice, there was a touch, just a little tinge of I told you so. Like you need to listen to me. Like I know what I'm saying. And then he said in no uncertain words that those people, those that live a kilometer away from us, those on the other side of the wall, they are not our friends. They are not people we can make peace with. They are not people we can live with. There is no future with those people. Anyone who will rape women, who will hunt young men when they're sleeping in their bed, who will murder children in front of their parents with glee, they cannot be part of the same species. It was hard to disagree with Baruch. More than just the intimidation factor that he had seen the worst of it, and he had paid a huge price. His leg was lost, but his life was saved. But he witnessed the worst barbarism in modern history. Baruch is a national hero and the kind of leader that the Jewish people need today. I have not had the honor of meeting Rachel Edrei yet, but I look forward to very soon. Throughout Tel Aviv, really throughout the entire country of Israel, there are pictures of Rachel Edrei that are graffitied on every wall in every town. It shows this 65-year-old blonde-haired woman who is the Rosie the Riveter of today's society in Israel, the modern hero. She has a strong arm, a cape, and she's serving cookies in all of the depictions. If you say the words Savta Rachel, which means Grandma Rachel, everyone throughout the country knows exactly who you're talking about. Rachel lives in a small town called Ofakim, which is about 25 kilometers, maybe 15 miles from the Gaza border. It was the furthest east that the terrorists were able to infiltrate on October the 7th. She has lived there with her husband David of 41 years for most of their life, and it was there that they raised their children together. They were used to sirens. They heard them every 18 or 24 months whenever there needed to be a diversion or a problem. And they knew that you go into your safe room from anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours, then you come out and you go about your day as you would any other 65-year-old person. In Rachel's case, semi-retired, gardening, looking out for the community. And that's exactly what they did. The sirens went off and Rachel and David went into their safe room and they stayed there for about an hour and a half. And then they came upstairs and were literally greeted by terrorists in their family room. The terrorists pointed AK-47 rifles at their heads and demanded that they sit there in silence. Getting 25 kilometers deep into Israel was no small feat for these horrid assassins. And they knew that the police would soon come, and they feared for their survival. So they barricaded themselves in the house, and they used Rachel and David as hostages. David was 68 years young, and Rachel 65. Rachel would be the first to tell you that she wasn't a religious woman, but she's inspired by everything Judaism has to offer. She was known as the most welcoming woman in all of the town of Ofakim, which ironically was what caused her the greatest challenge. Her door was literally open every day, which made it so accessible for the terrorists to come and go right into her kitchen. She would spend her free time baking and cooking for the nearby soldiers on an army base, which earned her the honorary title of base mom. She was known for her graciousness and for her hospitality. She was the kind of person that if you stopped and said, "Can I use your bathroom?" she would insist that you sit down and have coffee and cake afterwards and visit, even if you were meeting for the very first time. These terrorists are holding her at gunpoint. She's fearful for her life, and she doesn't know what to do. And she says to herself, "You know, most people leave my house happy and with full bellies. Why don't I try that? It's been a winning situation for me." Rachel's parents were from Iran. She had a little bit of broken Arabic, and she tried to converse with the terrorists. And she said to them, "You must be hungry. Let me give you something to eat. I have fresh pineapple, something that there's plenty of in Israel, but barely any of in Gaza." And she served them fresh pineapple. She then started to teach the terrorists some Hebrew words from Arabic. She said at one point, she even forgot that they were terrorists. She said, "Are you thirsty?" They said, "Yes." She said, "How would you like a Coca-Cola?" They said, "We would love it." She went to her refrigerator, gave them a Coca-Cola, and they spit it out. And they said, "This is Coke Zero. We need to have regular Coke." To which Rachel responded, "I'm a diabetic, and you could become a diabetic too if you keep drinking that Coca-Cola. It's very dangerous for your health. You should drink the Zero and take care of your pancreas and ensure you don't get diabetes. It's not only hereditary." She literally said that. 4 hours in, she started to get hungry. She said, "If I'm hungry, these terrorists must be hungry. And the only thing worse than a terrorist is a hungry terrorist." So she said, "You must be hungry. Let me bake you some cookies." And she did. She baked the terrorist cookies and fed it to them. And then she said, "I have some chicken. Let me warm it for you." And she did. And she fed the terrorists chicken. It was unbelievable. This whole time, a SWAT team had assembled around the Edry house, and they were ready to make entry. Complicating matters even more, the head of the SWAT team was Evyatar Edry, the son of David and Rachel. They tried to breach, and they were unsuccessful. They killed one terrorist and wounded another. And Rachel ran to her bathroom and came out with towels and bandages and wrapped them around the wounded terrorist. And he cried. And she held him and sang songs to him like her mother did. And he looked up and said, "You remind me of my mother." A few moments after that, the SWAT team breached and miraculously whisked Rachel and David into safety and eliminated each and every one of the terrorists. Rachel, who's now living with her son Evyatar, the police officer, says every time she closes her eyes, she sees those monsters that she sang with, those monsters that she fed pineapple and chicken to, those devils that she bandaged the wounds of, those barbarians that she nourished the bellies of, who were killed with full stomachs from her kitchen. Rachel is a national hero of Israel, and she's the kind of leader the Jewish people need today. Baruch and Rachel both took a situation that they didn't choose and they wouldn't choose, and they dealt with it in quintessentially Jewish ways. that are consonant with morality, and they're exemplary of values that we hold dear. Baruch essentially said, my life is more precious than your life if you're trying to kill me. That's what he said. And Rachel said, I'm going to appeal to the humanity that lives in each of you and to see the part of you that is made in God's image, if it results in you're not killing me. Both Rachel and Baruch went into survival mode, just in very different paths, but to the exact same destination. Our daughter Evie is living her best life at Emory University. We couldn't be more proud of who she is and the choices she's making. And she is one of the leading Zionists on campus. She called about a week and a half ago, and she was in tears. And I said, Evie, what's wrong? Are you okay? Are you safe? She said, I'm safe. I'm okay. I'm incredibly sad, Dad. Well, what happened, babe? She said, I went to this pro-Israel program on campus, and I was expecting it to be a pro-Israel program, but really what it was an anti-Palestinian program. And they said that there's no future for peace, and the Palestinians are all murderers, and they're terrible, and that you can't trust any Arab. And I hated it, Dad. It broke my heart. Now, to give some of you context who aren't familiar, our daughter Evie has studied intensive Arabic for 7 years. She has worked with Palestinian children in Jerusalem and taught them. She has countless friends who are Jewish and Zionist, and she is the most devout Zionist in our household. And she also has countless friends who are Arab and Muslim. And she dreams every day about a peace that our elected leaders in Israel will forge, that she and her Arab and Muslim friends can enjoy in the fruits of. And she told me this problem, and I did something that I usually don't do. I just listened to her. Most times I come off with some response or an explanation or advice, and I miss the mark. This time was one of the very few times I got it right. I just listened to her, and I consoled her. But I'm telling you, what I wanted to say were two disparate things. The Zionist in me wanted to say, Evie, I think this guy is right. I think there's no chance with the peace in Israel with the current Palestinian leadership and people. And it might take 2 or 3 generations to forge such a peace. And that is a horrible and painful reality. But I didn't say that. The other side of me, as a father, wanted to say to this man who I'd never heard his name of before, how dare you, sir? How dare you try and blow out the candle of hope that my daughter holds on to dearly and fights for every day, a candle of hope for peace. I will not allow you to blow out that candle for her or for anyone else. I didn't say that either. I just listened, and I told her that I love her. I was telling the story to one of my colleagues and classmates and dear friends, Rabbi Adam Kligfeld, who lives in Los Angeles, California. He has a kid who just graduated Harvard and another one at Brandeis, which are radically different college campus experiences. And he pointed out something to me in the text that was really interesting. Adam is a brilliant mind and always able to laser into something, give a perspective that most of us don't see. Every year when we read the story of Sarah and Hagar, we read it through a particular lens. Hagar is only in the picture to give children to Abraham, and there's tremendous jealousy between Sarah and Hagar. Ishmael comes as the child of Hagar, and Sarah doesn't like her very much, and then God says to Sarah, you're going to have a baby. And Sarah says, once I'm going to have a baby, I don't need Hagar here anymore. And she tells Abraham, get rid of Hagar and get rid of Ishmael. I don't want him in my house anymore. So sheepishly, Abraham does that and sends them out. And every year, when you and I read this story, I read it through the lens of Nachmanides, who tells us Sarah is the hard-hearted one. She's cold. She's cruel. She doesn't think about the feelings of Hagar and Ishmael. She is the villain of this story. And Adam said to me, what if we read it differently this year? What if you read it through the lens of exactly what it says in the text, where God says to Abraham, listen, you've got a problem on your hands, pal. You have an unhappy house. You cannot live with a blended family. You need to create shalom bayit. You need to create peace in your home. And you need to create a sense of happiness in your home. You have to set Hagar out, and you must make Sarah happy. You know, sometimes in life, we have to do things that are hard to do, but are messy. Sometimes when it comes to creating peace, whether it's in our homes or our lives or our countries, we have to make decisions that are painful. And sometimes forging harmony requires messiness. It even can require at times the suffering of others, like it did for Hagar. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to gloat in that necessity of said suffering, but at least we can be aware of that necessity. War is messy. War is bloody, and it is painful. And though sometimes we need war, and we need the very painful sacrifices that war entails, just to keep peace, even if that is unpleasant. I'm going to share something with you, and I ask for you not to judge me on the honesty of which I'm about to share. But after October 7th, when Israel went into Gaza, and it flattened the homes of the so-called innocent civilians who partook in October the 7th, and it killed those who said that they weren't combatants because they were wearing jeans although they carried assault rifles, or it took out people's homes and lives if they allowed rocket launchers in their living room. When those homes were flattened and those people were killed, I didn't shed a single tear. But when I saw a Palestinian child wandering the streets of Khan Yunis, emaciated, wounded, hungry, and lost, I found myself hurting, and I found a war happening inside my soul. And in that war, I swear to God, I heard Baruch and Rachel fighting each other. My instinct on seeing this kid was to cry. What did this kid do? It wasn't her fault that she was born into this messiness and this chaos and this hatred. It isn't her fault that she inherited this crappy mess from leadership that never stood up to the moment or took initiative. And my anger and my upset were real, and the tears that fell down my cheek were salty. No one's to blame for her reality. Well, maybe there is one. And what I found was that I began to blame Hamas for her reality, not Israel. And while I blamed Hamas for her reality, it still did not move my empathy. And both could live at the exact same time. Hamas could be responsible for the fate of this little girl, and it could still break my heart simultaneously. The dichotomy of these feelings is not limited to 6,000 miles away. It happens in our own backyard. Again, brutally honest, I am one of those guys that celebrate free speech everywhere, especially on college campuses. But I do not celebrate or agree or condone with spewing hate speech of any kind. I'm the kind of guy who loves an academic square where people can exercise their minds and their values. But I cannot tolerate a square where it is popular to demonstrate hatred and to traffic in stupidity. I commend every school official who has rightly shut down homophobia on college campuses and created zero space for racism on college. But I have no generosity of spirit or patience for school leadership who, when it comes to Jew hatred, says it depends on the context. And I have no room or bandwidth for those same school officials who will not shut down hate speech against Jews for fear that it squelches free speech. You see, I want a Palestinian state. I want it to live in peace. I want it to be demilitarized. I want it to have harmony and prosperity with Israel and all of its neighbors. But I refuse to achieve that goal at the expense of the Jewish state's safety or its very existence. The new year of 5785 is unlike any in my 51 years of life. Society seems to have thrusted a fork in the road and told all of us, you can go down path A or you can go down path B, but pick a path. Path A has Baruch leading the way, and on path B, Rachel has amassed a group of followers. Path A is the path that Evie wants to take, and path B is the path that she's fearful of not taking. Path A is the path that brings out the empathy for Hagar, and path B is the path that appreciates the logicality of Sarah. And we stand at the fork in the road, and we don't know which way to go. The anthem of the Jewish people is called Hatikvah. It means the hope. We can never lose hope. And at the same time, we cannot be naive and vulnerable. Hope and that preparedness, they have to live symbiotically, just like Baruch and Rachel, like Sarah and like Hagar. As we stand at that fork in the road, perhaps this is a time for all of us to take a different path. Not path A and not path B, but a path that is less traveled. And let's face it, the uncharted trails, they're always the scariest. Where will it lead? Where do we go? The road isn't paved. What if we made a mistake? But if we're able to illuminate the path with the light of Baruch and Rachel, if we hold the torch of Eve's fears and her dreams, if we take blended together in the flame of the empathy for Hagar and the practicality for Sarah, then I think with small steps, we can land at a place of security, solidarity, hope, survival, and eventually peace. Take my hand, I'll take your hand, and together, let's take that path forward to a new year. Amen and Shana Tova.